Hi, and welcome to another edition of GLP's 10 out of 10. And today we're honored to have with us American designer Rob Koenig. Rob grew up in Florida and found his way into the lighting industry there. He's worked extensively as a programmer, lighting director, associate lighting designer on a multitude of live shows, as well as being a highly accomplished lighting designer in his own right. He is absolutely a true collaborator, and he's also an award nominee. He's worked on designs for artists including Billy Idol, Papa Roach, Matchbox 20, J.Cole, Ministry, Carrie Underwood, and Eric Church, to name just a few. However, Rob is probably best known for his work with global rock band Metallica, with whom he has worked since 2008 as programmer, lighting director, and more recently as their lighting designer, creating some truly amazing shows. Welcome, Rob Koenig.
Hello,
How
Mr.
are you?
Ravenhill. I've been dying to tell you this for so many years now, but your name is the rock and roll name, Mark Ravenhill. Like you should have been like the bass player in Richie Blackmore's Rainbow or Dio.
Right.
I mean, Ravenhill is like the best last name ever. I just been dying to tell you this forever, but we've never gotten around to it. But yeah, Mark Ravenhill is the greatest rock and roll name ever.
There you go. Thank you. I'll start getting some t-shirts made up.
You very well should. Absolutely. Absolutely.
That would be great. And that's very kind of you. Thank you.
And I mean, the obvious one of all, Mark Ravenhill from the rock band Raven. There was a band named Raven. So, right. I mean, you could even take that logo for your t-shirt.
Yeah, that's right. I can see a whole new future here. Forget this lighting. Let's go down the branding and merch route.
Exactly. I love it. I'm in.
But I don't play any instruments. That's the one thing I've never been able to do.
We got to make you a front man then.
There we go.
Got to make you a front man.
We've got the time to do it at the moment.
I mean, you're kind of the front man for GLP anyway. So there you go. It's natural course of action is happening right now.
Right.
You're all good. You're the new front man for Ravenhill.
Oh,
have a Ravenhill and Don Dokken tour.
All right, you're going to get the gig as the lighting designer for sure. First show, you're there. How are things? How are you?
You know, all things considered, things are pretty good. Keeping our head above water and keeping positive. And I've been this year has been the curse, but it's also been the blessing. I've never had 9 months at home with my family before, so we've learned how to live together again, and it's something that's been kind of fascinating. Like the things I did not know about my daughter. My daughter's 23; she's in grad school at Johns Hopkins University. But the things I never knew about her, because I'm on the road, she has her life, I have mine, and like suddenly discovering all these things about her that I never really knew before. And it's been, it's been a blessing to be able to just rediscover my wife, and not being on a tour bus for so many months out of your airplanes or anything else. So it's been nice.
Yeah, that's great.
As much as this can be nice, I'm trying to pull the positivity out of it.
Exactly, and I think you're right. Despite what an awful year it's been, there's absolutely some silver linings to every part of this. So yeah, I hear about stories about people exactly like that, reforming relationships or forming stronger relationships. People, learning how to play musical instruments or cooking skills and things like that. So it's great. So. Thanks for finding the time to join us today.
Happy to. Love it.
We've got our 10 questions. I think I'm looking forward to this. I think it's going to be an absolutely fascinating conversation. So let's try kicking it off.
You have your expectations of me are way too high.
Come on. I'm sure there's got to be. Yeah. No, this is going to be great. All right, let's kick it off with the first one. So, going all the way back to the start of your career, what was your first show as a designer?
This is kind of a mixed bag question, because you always expect those moments when you get anointed a lighting designer for it to be like, being knighted and you are now a lighting designer, but it never really happened that way. You hear people and actors and things talking about like, well, suddenly it was just there and I was just doing it and you didn't realize it because things are moving so fast. The first time I actually got to design a singular show for a band, we were working out of Florida, and we would do all these hit and run shows, and Cellar Door, Phantasma, whatever promoter would buy 3 shows from the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, Marilyn Manson, Faith No More, all these bands, and we'd go and do the club circuit. So the first one I got to do as an LD, and not just teching for somebody, was Space Hog. They didn't have an LD, and I absolutely loved what they were doing. So I got to design the little rig that we were going to use for them for those 3 shows, and I got to run it, and it was exhilarating.
Right.
Loved it. That was when I really fell in love with this. From there, my first tour was Matchbox 20, and everyone thinks that's some grandiose thing, but it wasn't. It was me and the band in their first bus. There was 10 of us in total. It was, all of us on top of each other all the time. We were all hometown friends from Florida, carrying a small lighting package. So that was kind of like first lighting designer, but I was also the everything and the drum tech as well. And,
Right.
so having those moments, and you work your way up through the clubs and you do all of that. Better Than Ezra, similar kind of situation. The first time I actually got paid a fee to be a lighting designer would have been Billy Idol.
Okay.
Arlo was the designer prior to me, Paul Guthrie.
Mm-hmm.
And then the following year, he couldn't do it or whatever happened, and they actually allowed me to be the lighting designer. So that would have been 2005 or 6 was the first time I actually acquired a fee to be a lighting designer. So all depends on how you look at it, because the early days was all army of one. It was me and alone. Designing everything, programming everything. Before I even knew what the word programmer really meant, it was just, no, I'm doing all of this. I didn't know there was a job description for it. Pulling your own feeder, setting up your own lights with a couple stagehands, loading your own truck, all that stuff. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah, and that's obviously a way that so many have to start. So when exactly it crosses from being into the designer realm is I guess a gray zone. But that relationship with Billy Idol, that's still active today. You still design all of Billy's shows, right?
Actually, no. Over the past couple of years, the timing has not aligned for us. So the past couple of things have been to outside design firms that they've used. But it was pretty solid from 2005 to 2018. I did all of his shows, but over the past couple of years, the timing hasn't really worked out too much. So we haven't been doing too much together lately, unfortunately. But there's some people in there that are doing some great things for him. So I'm very happy to kind of watch from a distance right now and see what new innovations they're bringing to Billy. And they've been doing some very cool stuff.
Right. Yeah. Fantastic. Okay. So over that course of your career so far, obviously starting at that scale, as you mentioned, back in Florida, up to obviously some of the biggest shows in the world that you currently do. I'm sure you must have had a couple of, Spinal Tap moments where it didn't all quite go according to plan. Is there one particular one that you remember and you'd like to share?
I've got 2 favorites, actually.
Okay.
I'm going to share both of these with you because both of them are pretty damn funny.
All right.
In the earlier days, because I was one of the few responsible adults on a tour that didn't drink, didn't really drugs, didn't do anything like that, suddenly I got tapped to be the production manager all the time, the responsible adult.
Right.
So I started doing, from about like 2000 to 2005 or 6, I was doing a lot of production management as well as LD on tours. And this one time I was with Live. The band name is very important to the story. You'll understand why in a minute.
All right.
So the band was Live. They'd just released a record, and we were about to go into Canada. So I sat down with a couple of guys in the crew, sat down with our truck driver, and I started going over everything that we needed to do to go into the Canadian border, all the paperwork and everything. I'd already gotten the brokerage firm all lined up. And I said to the truck driver at one point, I'm sure you've crossed the Canadian border 100 times. You already know all this stuff, but I just want to go over it and make sure that everything's all dialed. And he's like, great. This old redneck dude, he was an absolute sweetheart. Well, about 2 hours later after our meeting, he comes over to me and he goes, hey, man, when you said I'd been across the Canadian border a bunch? And I go, yeah. And he goes, I've never done it. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I sat down with him and got a little bit more in detail of what he's supposed to do. He's wanting me to describe every piece of gear on the truck to him. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that, because you could teach me how to drive a truck in an hour, and then some customs agent standing over the top of me with a gun, and you're not going to remember anything. You're carrying sound and lighting equipment. That's all you need to know. And he's like, okay. I find out after we get across the border, he gets across, no real issues. He comes up to me and he goes, man, I get to the border, and he goes, they go, what are you hauling? I go, it's sound and lighting equipment. And I give them all the manifest and everything. And they go, okay, well, let's open up the back. So we open up the back, and the customs agent jumps up And the first case he sees is the snake's trunk. So what does the case say on the top of it? Live snakes.
Brilliant.
Customs agent jumps out of the back. Boy, what the hell are you bringing across our border? He goes, man, I don't know, but it's not a live snake. I swear.
Right.
It's just classic moment.
That's
live
brilliant.
Snakes on that trunk. So good. The other one that really, I love this one too. I was working with Butch Allen on the Black Keys. This would have been 2011 or 12. They had released El Camino. We're starting to blow up. We were getting them into arenas. And I ended up staying on the tour for an additional 3 weeks. Jim Runge, very dear friend of mine, was a tour manager. And Mikey Grant was and is still the LD for the Black Keys. But Mikey at the time didn't have the technology skills. He had all of the soul and timing in the world. He was a super good LD for them. He came up with the band. He was a friend of the band, but he didn't have the technology. So they wanted me to stay on the tour to make sure everything ran smoothly for a little while and train him and get him all up to speed. Now he's a rocket scientist. He's doing great.
Yeah.
But we have this moment in the show, the very end of the show, and they had this old sign that was homemade that said the Black Keys and light bulbs on it. And it was 3 circuits, 12 letters, 3 circuits. Very easy, right? No problem. So big climax of the show, the sign's coming in the dark, you can't see it, and then the big downbeat happens and it's supposed to light up and say the Black Keys. Well, it doesn't. The first circuit goes out. So it just says lackeys. I dropped to the floor just absolutely dying in laughter. Mikey is freaking out, doesn't know what to do. And I, from a ground position, have to grab the group on the screen and yank down the fader so that nobody can see or take pictures of the lackeys sign that was hanging above.
That's some quick reactions there.
Butch was so mad at me because I couldn't pull my camera out quick enough to take a picture of it before I yanked the fader out.
Right.
Oh, died.
Missed opportunity.
Total missed opportunity, but so good. I remember it's ingrained in my brain. It's burned in there forever.
One of those images, you see it whenever you want. Wow.
I'm not even sure if the band ever knew about it.
Great. Wow.
I don't think Dan or Patrick ever even heard about it. So they're just going to leave it that way.
Happening and went, and that was it. And it should remain that way as well. They don't.
Oh, I hope so. That was so good.
I'm sure they won't be watching. It's all good. Brilliant. So over your years, what's the best piece of advice that anyone's ever given you?
Best piece of advice everyone's ever given me was, can I cuss on here?
Yeah, absolutely.
I probably already have 20 times anyway. The best advice anybody ever gave me was get the fuck over yourself.
Right.
I was very young, and you get into these mindsets because you start working with all these LDs traveling through that the show is all about me and my lights and all this. And you start parroting these kinds of attitudes that start rolling through, and you start kind of, well, this guy's successful, that must be the way to do this. And the first time somebody said it to me, hit me right between the eyes like a ton of bricks. Get the fuck over yourself. It's not about you. Yeah. It's about the band on stage. It's about the 1, 2, 10, 50,000 people in the room. It ain't about you. You make a mistake, you get by it. You're dealing with a problem, you deal with it. It's not about you.
Right.
You've got to make sure that show goes off for those guys up on stage. You've got to make sure that they're as comfortable as possible. And you got to make sure that audience has no clue that a problem just happened, that you're going to blow by it. You're going to make sure that everything's up and running as much as you can. And you're going to make sure that everyone has an enjoyable experience. Right. Just those few words to me, get the fuck over yourself, meant the world to me. And it changed my path.
Right. That's very wise words indeed. And I could imagine, knowing you as I do as well, is that adapts straight into the whole, collaboration of,
very much so.
You're a team out there on the road. You all are working together. You're all trying to make the show happen every day, of course.
Very much so.
Within your own departments, but obviously across departments as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always get a good chuckle when guys are still trying to keep those old fights alive, those old typical lighting versus audio, lighting versus video, video versus audio fights alive. I'm just like, if that whole it's fun and jest, but like some guys take it too far and too seriously. And it's like, guys, if this whole machine doesn't work together and you guys don't figure out a plan of how to load this thing in, how to work together, how to get your feeder runs, how to get the cabling, how to get everything in its place, then it's never going to be a proper show. And you're going to be still loading in after doors every day because you guys just want to bicker and fight about whose territory is who.
Yeah.
You know, the guys that are super pro figure out on day one, okay, well, you've got that to do over here. I'm going to do this over here. And we're going to cross paths. And then we're going to, and then look at that. You're done really early tonight. You're helping me pull up some of my cable. Thanks. You know, that little bit of camaraderie goes a long way. You help out somebody for 5 minutes in their day, they're going to remember that.
Yeah.
So just all of that goes along with that, the ego mentality of what we do for a living.
That's right. That's right. It's just, yeah. It's that save that for the guys on stage.
Save that for the guys on stage. Absolutely.
Obviously, you've had a long career so far as well. What would you say professionally is your proudest achievement?
I don't know if it was a proudest achievement, but it was definitely a proudest moment I had, which kind of pointed to achievements. In 2016, my dear friend Phil Ely called me to do the Guns N' Roses reunion with him.
Right. Yeah.
So that was a pretty major moment. It was funny because as he was chatting with me on the phone, it didn't hit me. I hung up the phone. I'm like, oh, these are the reunion shows. Holy shit. Like it hit me like a ton of bricks right away. So I got to go out and play programmer and lighting director for him for a time on that in 2016. And then we passed it off to somebody else when Metallica got busy. But in I want to say, I can't remember, it's 2017 or 2018, the Metallica tour is rolling through Denver. And it goes to Mile High Stadium, whatever the corporate sponsor is, I don't remember. But we're rolling up to Mile High Stadium. And on one side of the building, in these giant 60-foot banners, is all of the shows, and they wrap around the top of the stadium. And one right here is for our Metallica show that we're doing the next day. And then two over is the Guns N' Roses Not in This Lifetime tour returning to that stadium.
Right.
And I walk off the bus and I look up and it just hits me so hard that I'm like, I had a lot to do with both of those shows. Programmer and LD on that one, designer and LD on this one. Right. Wow. At Mile High Stadium, like these are my favorite bands growing up and I got to be a part of both of those shows.
Right.
Unbelievable feeling. So that was a moment where I really got to sit back and just really think about that and what I've been able to accomplish. And I got to accomplish working for some of my favorite artists of all time. So that was a pretty big moment for me.
That's fantastic. It makes me realize how far you've come, as you said, you know.
Yeah. And I'm very happy with it. I'm very proud of it. And I'm the people that have helped me along the way. Still keep in touch with them. I still love them. And it's just been an amazing journey. But I'm so glad. I just saw a post a day or two ago from a guy. Do you remember what your first phone call for your tour was? And some guy said Rolling Stones, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, your first call was Rolling Stones? Like I have so much more love and value for everybody who worked their way up through the shitty clubs and the theaters and worked their way up through the ranks. And your first call is a Rolling Stones tour?
Yeah. Right.
What a lap of luxury you just walked into.
Born with a silver spoon in your touring mouth.
Oh, I mean, stadium tours suck on their own level, but it's like, wow, you've got an infrastructure of 8 buses of humans around you, and 25 trucks, and plus the steel crew, and 4 production coordinators, and a production manager, and 2 stage managers, and you have all this infrastructure around you. That's so rad. You never even had to fight for your paycheck.
Right.
Good for you.
You weren't out there doing it all on your own.
You weren't making sure that the band's guarantee from the night before got wired back to the accountant to make sure that they can make payroll that week.
Right. Some of those basics. So all the blood, sweat, and tears were obviously worth it.
Very much so. I do have a lot of love and a lot of appreciation for people who did come up the hard way and had to pull their own feet and had to tap power in horrible situations. And I have a lot of love and respect for that.
Well, I think it also gives it generally a more rounded person as well, because they then have an understanding of every part of the process and understand not just what needs to be done, but how long it needs to take as well. So that when they shout over a radio, "Hey, Johnny, can you do this and this?" they know not to bark at Johnny after 5 minutes when it's a 30-minute job. So, yeah.
And with the fact that I can still go back and do club and theater shows and have a great understanding of the budget and the gear that needs to be utilized in order to do a show like that. They'll call me up and I'll do a club and theater show, and somebody will go, "Well, we don't have a Metallica budget." Well, of course you don't.
Right.
I'm not going to try to cram 200 moving lights into a club. We're going to make sure that this looks right, that this goes within your budget, and that it's appropriate for your show. And that's from years and years of being a bus and trailer, or a van and trailer, or two buses and one truck, in smaller situations where you're not carrying 14 to 16 trucks a year around.
Yeah, that's right. Adapting it
keeps you grounded.
Right. There you go. That's a very nice way of putting it.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously, the pandemic is ongoing still, and we've had various levels of lockdown. What do you normally do in your downtime?
This is funny for me, because I always feel like I'm the weird guy, because I don't. You look at me and you go, "That dude drinks beer and watches football." Can't stand football. Very rarely will drink a beer. Doesn't do anything for me. I don't enjoy most beer that often. I love spending time with my family. I've got 2 dogs that I spend time with.
Yeah.
When we lived in Florida and we had a house and we had a yard and the whole thing, I love spending time outside in the yard, and I love spending time at the beach. But I don't really have any hobbies or anything outside of what we do.
Right.
I'll read up a little bit when I'm at home and read up on what everybody else is doing. I'll keep in touch with some people. But for the most part, I don't have any weird little hobbies, like friends of mine that work on cars or do this. I love spending time with the family. So that takes up my time when I'm at home.
Yeah. But that's a great way to spend it as well, obviously.
Yeah.
And your normal schedule, that as you mentioned, that time at home is rarer,
it's precious,
and therefore much more valuable.
So precious. There's been for the past few years, it's been 10 or 11 months away from home. So that 4 to 8 weeks that I do get at home is precious,
Yes.
And I like being a workaholic, but I also like my downtime and shutting off the brain and not bringing it home with me. And I don't have little lights everywhere in the house, and I don't have any cool little RGB under cabinet lights, and I don't have posters hanging up everywhere, and I don't have any of that kind of stuff, because I just want to be able to unplug from it, come home, and be with my family and do fun things and go to the beach and go hang out, that kind of stuff. So
right. Yeah. A very worthy use of time. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Sorry. As you mentioned, you're on the road a lot. You've obviously traveled the world. You've seen a lot of places, seen a lot of venues, worked in a lot of venues. Do you have any particular favorite venue somewhere?
It's very few in like the arena and stadium realm would ring as a favorite venue, because so many of them they're cookie cutter. They're either old or they're new, or their bays are great for the rigging team or they're not, and there's good steel structure. Well, the dressing rooms are nice in here, that kind of stuff. A lot of those buildings don't have personality. I mean, of course, you have the achievements in your life when you get to go do shows at Madison Square Garden, when you get to go do Stade de France, when you get to go do places like that, Wembley, things like that. Nebworth was a big one for me. Right. But favorite venues end up being in like the club and theater level, because those venues have vibe and they've got personality. Right. And maybe not my favorite venues, but fond memories of them, or, oh my God, I got to do the Beacon Theater. You know what I mean? Like going and doing the Beacon Theater was a huge experience for me. Right. I'm an old House of Blues guy. I worked at the House of Blues when I was younger, from like 97 to like 2000, 2001, and at full time at least. I worked part time there for a few years after. So I kind of have an affinity for a lot of the House of Blueses, and I think that was a great. It still is a great chain of venues in the United States. The Norva in Norfolk, Virginia, I've always loved. They did such a great job on that venue. And then weird venues that are not my favorite places to do a show, but like have a lot of bizarre history, like the Rave Eagles Ballroom in Milwaukee. It's this 3-tier venue. The Eagles Ballroom, which is the large venue, is on the top floor, and I think it's a 3,000 or 4,000 capacity room. The lower venue on ground level is the Rave, and then there's the Rave underground. Okay. And it's just got this very bizarre history. There's supposedly there's these tile mosaics on the floor that have like white Aryan nation stuff from like the 1930s and 40s.
All right.
There is this old pool that is underground, and I could probably tell you how to get back there if I was ever back there again. But there's this old weird Olympic-sized pool that's been drained for years and years, and there's people would swear there's ghosts down there. That this one ghost appears at 2:08 a.m. every night or whatever. So it's this old haunted building right down the street from the Ambassador Hotel where Jeffrey Dahmer did his biddings, and right in that area. So it's a very sketchy area of town to begin with. So just I kind of miss going and doing the club circuit, because there would be all these weird venues like that you would come in on and just have these bizarre experiences, and crew would tell you about all the weird stuff that happens there. So I do kind of miss that, but yeah, they're just good memories from weird venues, you know.
Pick out the weirdest one. So
yeah. But
San
Francisco Fillmore is another great one to go do. I love that one because of its rich history, you know. And once again, these places aren't maybe the greatest, you know, a lot of these places are upstairs load-ins. The Fillmore's an upstairs load-in. The Eagles Ballroom's an upstairs load-in. They're a pain in the ass to do a show in, but there's a rich history there that you can't deny. It's incredible to be in those places.
Right. Makes each day, you know, something new and exciting, or something different than, as you said, doing that cookie cutter.
I was never a big fan of like the new rock venue. You know, you go into some town and the new rock venue's open. It was too shiny and too sterile and too clean and too pretty and too everything. Where it's like you go into those other dirty ass clubs and it's like, wow. They've got Harpo's, Detroit. That's another good one. Harpo's in Detroit. Oh, that place has been around since like 71. They've never even changed the carpet in that joint. It's disgusting. But there's so much history there, and there's so much craziness that's happened there. So many crazy things that I've witnessed that have happened there. It's just an unbelievable place. Unbelievable place.
Wow. That's good. I'm sure each has their own. You probably close your eyes, you know, put you in there, go describe it by the smell. And then
very much so. Oh yeah. Like Harpo's, if you can close your eyes and if you can imagine stale popcorn, obviously beer that's been sitting outside on a sidewalk for 30 years or more, like that just nasty, stale, hot smell.
Right.
What else? Make a little bit of whiskey, certainly, and a faint smell of cocaine from the dressing room, most certainly.
This is the icing on the cake, so
But yeah, some of those places are just absolutely amazing to go to. So I don't know if I have like a favorite, but definitely some ones that I have fond memories of.
Great, of all of those. Brilliant. That's some great names there. Absolute classic names. Yeah, fantastic. Do you have a particular artist or an album of music that you would absolutely always want to have close by? Again, you know, in the quarantine, a lot of us have spent a lot of time at home. Who would you go back to for that?
I've gone through phases during the quarantine, during all of this. To me, 2020 started sucking just a few days into the year because Neil Peart passed away. Neil Peart, apologies for his pronunciation.
Yes.
He passed away, and that really set the tone for 2020 for me. And then, you know, within, you know, another month, which I wasn't a huge fan of. I'm not a sports guy, but then Kobe Bryant passed away. And then a month later, we're on lockdown. So it's just like 2020 sucked from, you know, New Year's Day. So that one album, I went through a huge Rush phase, obviously, very early on the pandemic. 9 Inch Nails has been there for me. Faith No More has been there for me. This is a tough choice. I'm going to make the decision right here and now that one record would have to be shit.
So play for time.
This is a tough one because it's either going to be Rush Signals, which is a bizarre choice for a lot of people, but Rush Signals was the first one I bought with my own money as a kid, and I absolutely love that album beginning to end, note for note. Most people would choose Moving Pictures, but this was just a continuation of that.
Right.
The second album would be 9 Inch Nails' The Fragile. And the third record would be Faith No More Album of the Year. So I'm going to go Jellyfish Spilt Milk, too. That's another great record. That's another Desert Island record. All right. Here, now, Rush Signals.
Rush.
There we go. That would have to be the one I'd have to take to the Desert Island with me.
Right. Okay. That's obviously a brilliant choice. obviously got some extra personal memories in there. And
very much so.
Yeah, you're right about obviously losing Neil earlier in the year is absolutely
crushed
tragic.
my soul.
Yeah.
Well, to find out that I've moved. I live in Los Angeles now, and come to find out that he lived within 2 miles of me. Is when the post came out. It was tagged in Santa Monica, Florida. Santa Monica, California. And I was like, Santa Monica? I thought he was Toronto. Well, apparently he bought a house down here some years ago. I didn't know he lived within a couple miles of me down here.
Right.
So it was kind of crazy to find that out, but huge impact on my life since I was a kid. And for me, it wasn't even so much going down the rabbit hole and listening to music, but listening to his interviews. He was such a well-spoken, self-educated person, and his voice and his cadence of his speaking, I thoroughly enjoy. I listened to hours of interviews with him. He's just such a well-spoken human, and so insightful with everything that he did, not only his lyrics but all of his thoughts in life. And very inspirational person to me since I was a kid. So yeah, huge loss for me.
Right. Yeah, absolutely tragic for so many people out there, for sure. But that's a great tribute then to pick their album. That's a nice. Yeah.
Well, I had the pleasure. I only saw Rush once live when I was it was only a few years ago. When I was a kid, I never got to go to a show. My parents would never let me out of the house to go see a rock concert. And then I turned 14. They finally let me go, but I never got to see Rush. Rush always eluded me, and they were my favorite band. I never got to go see them. And a few years ago, it was on their Time Machine tour, which was the back end of Clockwork Angels. They were rolling through Florida. I happened to be home. I grabbed my wife and my daughter, and I apologized. I'm like, "You're going to go watch Old Man Rock. I'm sorry. You're going with me." So we go down there and meet up with Howard Ungerleider and Creech from Premier Global is down there at the time, hanging out. Watch the show, and that was the first time I ever got to see them. And knowing how Neil is about adoration and everything, me and myself, my wife, my daughter, Howard, Creech were all kind of standing in a circle backstage talking. Seth Conlon was crew chief at the time. And Neil, I'm sure just to fuck with Howard, comes walking through. He had just come in for the day from his motorcycle ride, carrying a duffel bag, and just cuts right through the middle of us. And I'm sure that's his way of fucking with Howard.
Right.
But for me, I just grabbed my wife's hand and I don't be an idiot, don't be an idiot, don't be an idiot, don't be an idiot, and just let him walk by. Right. And I held my breath the whole time, and he got out of sight. And then I allowed myself to breathe again. And I'm just like, that was like one of the few moments in my life I've been starstruck. And I was just like, I would love to sit down and have a chat with him.
Yeah.
But alas, we have hours and hours and hours of video interviews to still listen to from him and listen to his brilliance. He was a brilliant guy.
That's nice. That's nice. And there is an archive of stuff absolutely to go back to. Sure. Yeah. That's funny. You know, the whole starstruck moment is when you're used to obviously being in that environment and everything.
It's weird when it happens to you. Yeah, it's really weird. I even got a bit starstruck. Our tour accountant on Metallica had somehow, because it was Q Prime, Cliff Bernstein with Q Prime was the guy that signed Rush all the way back when on the first record. So Cliff and Peter are two of Metallica's managers for Q Prime and have been for years. And when we got to Toronto, Cliff had reached out to Chris Reiser to make sure that we took care of a gentleman named Hugh Syme. Hugh Syme is the Rush artist. He's done every one of their record covers since Fly By Night, since the second record cover.
Right.
So that was another rock star moment for me, getting to meet Hugh Syme, and him and I still keep in touch to this day. He is a lovely human being, and he will sit down and tell you about his inspiration of every record cover he ever did for them. And he's done other record covers as well, but that's what he's most known for. So Signals to me was a very unique record cover, especially for the time frame, you know, the Dalmatian sniffing the hydrant. And there's a whole story that goes along why his thought process was on that one. And it's a very interesting read. I'll see if I can find a link and send it to you.
Right.
And it's a very different, all of his record covers are incredibly different, but especially that one was so bizarre for 1981. And he had to fight management. He had to fight the label, and the band had his back the whole way to to get that record cover out, and now it's an iconic record cover. It's fascinating. But I'll see if I can I'll find that story and send it over to you.
That's
pretty
great.
amazing.
So some of that having some of that history and some of those stories behind just an image, is fascinating.
And he's still friend with the guy that he used as Starman, the naked guy doing this against the Red Star. He's still friends with that guy. It was like his next door neighbor when they were growing up.
That's bizarre.
The guy's claim to fame is, I've got the most famous ass in rock and roll.
Right. Doesn't quite get recognized walking down the street.
Not exactly.
He's the famous one. Wow. Brilliant. Now, if looking back, if you could wind the clock back some years and go and visit the teenage Rob and offer a piece of advice, what would that piece of advice be?
Somebody gave me another piece of sage advice that I wish I had listened to a lot longer ago, because like I was saying earlier, you kind of parrot the attitudes and the thought processes of the people that come around. So you meet a lot of these LDs and they're very gregarious people. So you start acting very gregarious. And, I'm already, as you can tell, a talker. So telling people how good you are is not necessary. This is something that I try to impart on younger people coming up. You don't need to tell people how good you are. They'll notice it. Now, they may not come right out and go, you're really good at what you do. But there's always somebody there, whether it's one of your band members, whether it's a coworker, whether it's a production manager, a tour manager, that will take notice of how good you are. And you don't need to parrot that. You don't need to say it. You don't need to tell anybody. Just keep your head down, do your gig, and do it well and enjoy it. And get along well with your teammates. And you don't have to tell people how good you are, because the cream always does rise to the top.
Yeah, there you go.
The underdog will always get recognized. And I firmly believe in that. Some people that I've seen over the years have been the shiniest, brightest star. And they flash out very quickly because they're sitting there walking around going, I'm so awesome. And people just go away.
Right.
We don't want to, when you're a bit more humble, when you're more invested in your work and the belief in what you're doing, people are going to notice that a hell of a lot more than you talking about how rad you are.
Right. That's yeah.
And with that comes my favorite advice ever: push button, get banana.
Perfect.
Butch Allen's words of wisdom: push button, get banana.
I need to get that printed up somewhere and put up on the wall.
I've had LDs that I've been training on tours when I've been a programmer or a designer on a tour, and I've had them put that right there on the console, write it out and look at it. So just when you think you're going to sit there and you're going to question what the artist is doing, you're going to question what your designer is doing, or you're going to throw a fit or whatever the case, or you're going to take over the tour once everybody leaves, push button, get banana. Remember that.
That's it.
And, for me, working underneath another designer, whether I have my own thoughts or not, I know to respect their wishes, because you don't know why some things are happening. It may be a direct line back to the artist or the manager of why that song is in green, but you really want to do it in red. Don't change it. It has no bearing on you whatsoever. You're there to operate the show when you're the lighting director. You're there to make sure that show is showcased the same way night after night. It's not your job to second guess what's happened in the design process. When you get your own designer job, great. If you want to give that designer like a thought, like, hey, I'd really love it if we did, and perhaps they'll listen to you. And most of the time they will. Yeah. But don't sit there and do things behind their back. Your job as the lighting director or the programmer is to push button, get banana.
Right. Yeah.
And I love Butch for saying that to me years and years ago.
Boil it down to that. That's right. Yeah. Keep that perspective on everything.
Very much so.
Yeah. Yeah. Push button, get banana. Right. That's it. That's the phrase of this interview. Fantastic. Okay. So if you had the opportunity to sit down for coffee with one person, could be living, could be past, and obviously you mentioned a few people, that you've worked with or that you respect already during the conversation. Would it be one of those or somebody else different? If you could.
No, it would be Neil.
It would be Neil. Right.
It would be Neil Peart. Yeah. I've always since my adolescence, I've been very fascinated with him as a person, because he was so much more than a drummer, you know, and not only one of the greatest drummers that we've ever seen. He had his own unique style. He'd sit down behind a kit, you could hear that it was Neil, you know, and that's one thing I really adore about musicians, is not how proficient they are at the instrument. For me, it's, is there a personality there? You know,
Right.
there's a lot of these young up and coming metal bands. I'm still an old metalhead. I still like listening to some of them, but there's no personality with a lot of these players. They all sound very good. They're all incredible with what they do. I could never pull off any of the things that they did growing up a drummer. But I can't hear Ringo Starr, Dave Grohl, Lars Ulrich, Neil Peart, Charlie Benante. I can't, Dennis Chambers. I can't hear that when they sit down behind a kit. You know, and that's the thing about Neil. And then you take that from Neil, and not only did he want to be the best at what he did, he constantly trained, and in his mid 40s, he's doing something similar to what I'm doing now, and kind of reinventing himself. And he's the inspiration for a lot of this, and doing something new, and retrained with Freddie Gruber, who does that in their mid to late 40s and retrains how to play. You know, and that's very inspiring for me. And then let's add on to that, he was the band's principal lyricist. He wrote all the lyrics to all the songs since he joined the band. And then let's add to that he was an avid motorcyclist and a writer as well, an avid reader. I mean, the guy, like, he must have never had a bored moment because of all of these things that he did. And I find it very fascinating. He's just very well spoken, part of our rock history, you know. And very different human than anything else you would have expected to come out of the 70s or 80s rock genres. You know, all those prog rock guys, when you look back and you talk about Peter Gabriel, Genesis, you talk about Yes, you talk about Rush, and I was never really a huge fan of any of them but Rush. But they're all very accomplished, very well-spoken guys, very intelligent people. I was very fascinated all my entire life with Neil.
Eloquent, well-educated.
Very much so, yeah. Yeah, so if I ever got the opportunity to have a dinner with Neil Peart, I would love that.
That would be the one. That'd be the one. Really fantastic choice. Absolutely fantastic choice. Yeah, there we are. And we get to our last question. Here we are.
Yes, sir.
So in a moment, when we finish the conversation, you're going to get a phone call from the US Olympic team, and they're going to call you up. Yeah. You are.
You've seen my physique, right?
You're the one they need. Well, it's for everybody. You're the one they need. So it could be for the summer games, or it could be for the winter games. So if they're going to call you up, what's the one thing you'd like to have a go at?
Well, artistic swimming. Would it be like, you know, doing
doing the whole Swan Lake?
Swan Lake. I think artistic swimming would have to be it.
Yeah.
I would say surfing, since surfing is going to be a new thing in 2020 Olympics. I would have to say surfing, not only because it's finally going to be recognized as a proper sport, but it's something I grew up around. I was a surfer when I was a kid, skateboarded quite a bit when I was a kid.
Okay.
You grow up on the beaches of Florida. That's what you do. Knew a lot of BMX kids. So, and I've always, and the reason we moved to where we did out in California was just because I'd be near the beach. As much as I have my love for the beach, I'd have to say surfing.
Surfing. Brilliant. That'd be great.
Although I'm sure at this point in my life, I'd have a very hard time finding my center of gravity, but you know, we'll work on that.
You get extra points for that, depending on how they go.
Well played.
There we are. That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Now, before we go though, there's a few more questions I kind of like to ask you, because recently, obviously, with your work with Metallica, you've started to do some shows. You've done some things with them that through the pandemic, they've been able to put on some performances. And it would be great just to hear a little bit about that and the process and how it all came about.
Well, the first one that we did, we've done two so far. The band did one Zoom thing where they were all separate. They were still in quarantine. It was somewhere around June. And they put together an acoustic version of a song called Blackened. And it was, the 4 Zoom windows, and that's how they did it. But that kind of inspired them. They wanted to start doing more. So we ended up doing a show at a winery in Sonoma.
Mm.
And we basically set up in the parking lot, and we had the vineyards as the backdrop for a little bit. Well, we did most of it at night. But it was definitely a challenge. I mean, we wanted to limit the number of people that were on site. So I was one of the techs as well. I didn't get to, have the white gloves on and
Right.
all that. So I was actually slinging gear, and I was allowed one lighting tech. Minimal amount of video guys come in to shoot it. Our video director, Gene McAuliffe with PRG, came in to be the video director for it, and ended up editing it as well to keep down on staff. And we were just as skeleton crew as possible, and loaded in as much gear as possible to do this thing. We were getting COVID tested once every 3 days while we were there.
Right.
We had a scary moment where we had a bunch of false positives come back, and we locked down the production for a couple of days. Everybody got retested twice, and it turned out it was a false positive, so we're all okay, which was thankful.
Right.
But logistically, couldn't do it in a venue. We didn't want to do it in one of the typical stages that everyone has set up around the country, because it doesn't lend to Metallica at all. Metallica is their own unique thing. We try to keep them as unique as possible and separate from the pack. So we didn't want to go into one of these prefab stages and do something.
Right.
So we ended up at the Mountain Winery and some genie lifts and some boom lifts to get some lights up in the air. And we did that. And that was for a drive-in series from a company called Encore. They've done a handful of them so far. And it was cool. We actually went to go see it in Woodland Hills, and everyone was there. They had the projection screen. We had an opening band, which was 3 Days Grace. They had recorded their own thing, a 40-minute set, separately from us. Dan Brown is our production designer, kind of came up with the concept, and they started talking to different venues, and we ended up at this winery in a parking lot.
Right. Fantastic. And
Perfect for Metallica.
And a big success.
And a big success. It went really well. It went really well. And then the last one we did, I just came back from last Sunday. We basically did it as a Zoom conference.
Okay.
Which everyone's seen now. But the band is a very symbiotic relationship, more so than most artists I've ever worked with, where they feed off the energy of the audience greatly. And that's one thing that they were really missing when we did the winery show, because it was 10 people in the back who are half of our crew that don't have any show duties necessarily. 2 or 3 guys from management and a wife or two. You know what I mean? That was their audience. It was very uncomfortable for them. So this one, they wanted to see their fans. They wanted to really bring that point home. So Dan came up with the Zoom concept, and we went through 2 or 3 iterations of how to do this, how to keep costs down, all of those things. So we ended up using the band's HQ up in San Rafael, California. And there's a room that's been there that has just not ever really been utilized for anything other than storage. But there is a pipe grid, and there's an old pipe grid that's actually existing in there. A little bit of history on that room. Apparently Journey owned that building prior to Metallica buying it in 2000. So they used to shoot some of their videos in there. So okay, so 2 or 3 of our guys go up there, they clean out the room, they put everything into a separate storage facility, clear everything out, and give us a blank canvas. We loaded in 4 video walls to surround the band. We brought in Fireplay, because they were doing a lot with Zoom and how to render and capture all of these people from Zoom around the world. So they came in and managed that for us. And then they sold different tickets. I think $14.99 was the you can watch it ticket. And then all the way up to, I think about $100 was to get up on the Zoom wall, and you get a t-shirt and a couple other things. So it was a very cool charity event. I'm not 100% sure of how many people actually watched it. I heard it was a great success, though. I heard it went really well. And the band loved it, because they could see a lot of the people that end up on the wall, the super fans. So they've met these people at some point before in a meet and greet. They were calling them out by name. Then we'd blow up their picture up on the wall, so they'd actually have a one-on-one interaction with them in between songs. And the band really got to see their fans again, and it was a good moment for them. They were really, really happy with it. James I talked to him briefly afterwards. He was over the moon with it. He was just grinning ear to ear that he got to see these people again. So it was not only for a good cause for their charity, but also for their soul, for all of our souls to be able to get back together and do something like that.
Yeah.
So it was
That's
great.
fantastic. And that's fantastic that they want to do it. And they're obviously keen to experiment and try and find, what's the Metallica way of doing a show right now.
Very much so. That's one thing I've always loved about these guys. It's going to get hard. It's going to be hard to get there, but whatever we're going to end up doing is not going to be cookie cutter. It's not going to be what somebody else has done.
Yeah.
Or at least that's what we strive for. There's so many shows out there. Sometimes, something looked like somebody else's show, but you really strive to, and they've always strived to have everything just be a bit different, have everything be how we wanted it to. And the problem with that is that they don't do anything half-assed.
Right.
So where they weren't going to go into this thing doing it half-assed. It was either going to be, we're going to have hundreds of people up on this wall that we can look at, or we're not going to do it. And they gave them a unique set list, songs that they never played before, songs that they've done acoustic versions of only in a couple events.
Right.
So it was a unique set list as well, which was great for the fans too. They really loved that. So
when, as you say, especially if it's the super fans, if it's that real kind of hardcore, that's great that they're giving something back.
They love doing that. They really appreciate their fan base more than any artist I've ever worked for. They really do, and they really take heed with where they're at. They understand that if it wasn't for them, so they love those moments. They really do.
That's fantastic. Well, it's great to hear, obviously, that you've been busy and been doing some projects and keeping your head in the game, so to speak. And I'm sure if they've been successful so far, then that train may well continue. And obviously, we'll keep our ears posted to any media announcements about what you might be up to next with a bit of excitement. Sounds great.
Certainly hope so. Yeah, I think things are gonna, for the rest of the country, it's difficult. For some of the major cities, there are some things happening. It's one of the reasons I moved to Los Angeles in the first place. And I've been able to do some other outside projects as well. As of late, things are picking up. Things are going to start happening. I think the announcement that we've gotten this week of having 4 different vaccines now that are going to be available pretty soon is a beautiful light at the end of a very, very dark, long tunnel. And people are hanging on by the hair of their chinny chin chin right now. And I don't even understand how some people are holding on. And I'm thankful that they are. It's been so tough on so many, and I've been in a bit more of a blessed position than others, and it's been tough on us. And I'm just glad to see that possibly by spring that we might actually be, a lot of us might be back to work, and then hopefully by summer. Live Nation's predicting a busy summer, so let's hope that happens.
That's great. Exactly. And more of the more of the festivals. I'm sure there's going to be new versions of shows where there's going to be a new normal somehow. So as we all find that out together, that's going to be an exciting part of the process as well. So, but as you say, let's get everyone back and doing stuff again will be fantastic. So
absolutely, and let's start breaking some gear so we can buy more from GLP.
There we go. That's what we need. Absolutely.
You like that? Was that good? Come on, that was a good commercial, right?
Nice plug. I like that. Yeah. Fantastic, Rob. Once again, thank you so much for finding some time. It's really appreciated. It's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much.
I will always find the time for you, Mr. Ravenhill. Always. You've been there for me for a very long time, and I really appreciate what you and the GLP family have pulled off for me over the years. So it's very appreciated, and trust me, I'll always make the time for you, brother.
Good. It's always a pleasure to work with you and everybody that you always work with as well. I know I mentioned it at the beginning, but collaboration is just fantastic. It's always great to collaborate with you. It really is. So
very much so. I appreciate that.
I look forward very much to meeting up in person and
more drinks. We had some good drinks last time we hung out. That was fun.
That's right. Yeah.
That was very fun. Yeah.
It was good. We'll be doing it again. Share a nice dinner.
Awesome.
And, great conversation. Rob, thank you once again. Be well. Take care. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Christmas. We'll see you soon.
Take care.